I was the ace programmer at our company. To save $100 million project, I rewrote the code on the fly, only to have the CEO, my girlfriend, and her idiot cousin strip me of my entire bonus for not following protocol. Fine, you want protocol? On the new project, I executed their deeply flawed plan to perfection, single-handedly building a mountain of shitcode. When the project imploded and the company was on the brink of bankruptcy, my girlfriend tearfully begged me to save them. I just smiled. Don't worry. Isn't this exactly by the book? 1. Beautiful. The conference room erupted in thunderous applause as the game character I was controlling, the Wyvern, executed a flawless drift, dodging a storm of projectiles before whipping around to obliterate the boss with a final WRM's roar. At the head of the table, David Sterling, the man they called the king of venture capital, shot to his feet, his eyes gleaming with excitement behind his glasses. Lau, you're an absolute genius. That evasive maneuver and instant counter is 100 times more fluid than the clunky parry system in the original plan. I love this design. I let my hands fall from the keyboard, exhaling slowly as I gave Sterling a nod. Glad you like it, Mr. Sterling. It was just a little on-the-spot improvisation. A little improvisation? That was a stroke of genius. Sterling turned to the woman beside me, my girlfriend and the CEO of our company, Elysian Games, Ava Chun. Ava, I want a director of engineering. No, what I mean is Apex Ventures is in on this project. $100 million. And we'll add more, depending on performance. Dressed in a tasteful Chanel power suit, Ava flashed a perfect corporate smile and extended a hand. Thank you for your faith in us, David. I promise, Elysian will not disappoint. The room was electric, everyone buzzing with the thrill of landing a massive investment. Everyone except one person, Kyle Chun, Ava's cousin and the project's nominal director. His face was a thundercloud, his eyes like poisoned daggers fixed on me. You'd think I'd just desecrated his family's crypt, not save his ass. I scoffed internally, not bothering to give him a second glance. I had built this project from the ground up. I designed the architecture. I wrote the core code. Kyle, riding his cousin's coattails, was just a name on an org chart whose main contribution was making idiotic, amateur suggestions on documents I'd written. Just 1 minute before the demo, I was doing a final check when I discovered a fatal logic bomb in a low-level data call, a piece of code Kyle had personally supervised in a late-night change. If we had followed the presentation script, the game would have crashed to a blue screen within 3 minutes. It wouldn't have been a demo. It would have been our company's funeral. With no time to explain or report it up the chain, I made a split-second decision and switched the build to a backup repository I had built weeks ago. One Kyle had shot down for being too aggressive in its design. And that's what led to the spectacle Sterling had just witnessed. I saved the company. I saved Kyle Chen's career. The least he could do was not look at me like I'd murdered his dog. Sure enough, the moment the investors left, before we could even pop the champagne, Kyle's roar echoed through the conference room. Lau, who the hell gave you the authority to change the demo build in front of an investor? He slammed his hand on the table, spittle flying. What do you think our company's processes are? A joke? Do you think my instructions are meaningless? I leaned back in my chair, calmly packing up my laptop. If I hadn't, in 3 minutes Mr. Sterling would have been looking at a blue screen of death instead of giving your project $100 million. You. Kyle's face turned crimson, his embarrassment twisting into rage. Even if there was a bug, you report it through the proper channels. I decide how to handle it. You went over my head. This is insubordination. My colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, none of them daring to speak. They all knew Kyle was an empty suit. If I had followed protocol, the ship would have sailed long before he figured out what to do. But I never expected what came next, not from Ava. Kyle's right. Her voice was cold, imbued with the authority of a CEO, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Leo, you went too far this time. My head snapped up. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. We'd been together for 3 years. I'd been with her since the company was just a dream operating out of a garage. She knew my skills better than anyone, and she knew damn well her cousin was a hack. I thought she would at least defend me, even if it was just in private. She didn't. She stood by Kyle, looking at me not as her partner, but as an unruly subordinate. Ava, you know the situation was... I don't want to hear excuses, she cut me off. All I know is that you broke company protocol. If everyone just did whatever they wanted whenever they felt like it, what's the point of having rules? What's the point of having managers? Every word was an ice-cold needle piercing my heart. I laughed a bitter, angry sound. So, to protect your precious protocol, I should have just sat back and watched the demo crash and burn? Let years of our hard work go up in smoke. Insolence. Kyle, emboldened by his cousin's support, grew even cockier. Leo, are you questioning the CEO's decision? An employee who can't follow orders, no matter how talented, is a liability to this company. I ignored him, my eyes locked on Ava. I searched her face for a hint of doubt, a flicker of the bond we shared. There was nothing, only the cold, hard resolve of a CEO. To restore discipline and make an example of this behavior, Ava took a deep breath, as if making a difficult but necessary decision. I am officially announcing that due to Leo Vance's severe breach of protocol, his entire quarterly bonus is revoked. Furthermore, his actions will be detailed in a company-wide email as a lesson in what not to do. She paused, delivering the final blow. I hope you all learned from this. At Elysian, protocol is the bottom line. Clap, clap, clap. Kyle started the applause, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. Around the room, my team, my guys, kept their heads down, their expressions troubled. They couldn't look at me, and they couldn't look at Ava. In that instant, I felt like a clown. The clown who single-handedly saved the circus, only to be publicly whipped by the ringmaster for not having the proper form. And the ringmaster was the woman I loved. My heart sank, plummeting into a cold, dark abyss. That night, I didn't go back to our apartment. I crashed in the break room at the office. Around midnight, Ava sent me a text on iMessage. Still mad? Come to my office. Let me explain. I stared at the words and laughed. Explain what? How she publicly humiliated me to protect her idiot cousin's fragile ego, sacrificing my contributions and my dignity in the process. I didn't reply. The next morning, the notice of my punishment was posted on the company's internal servers and blasted out in a company-wide email. It was an official memo, written in cold, corporate jargon, painting me as a reckless egomaniac with no respect for teamwork or discipline. My official corporate headshot was at the top, making me look like a wanted criminal. My coworkers avoided my gaze as they passed my desk. At 10 a.m., the company held the kickoff meeting for our new S-tier project, Project Oracle. Kyle Chun, beaming with confidence, took the stage to announce that this new $200 million project would, once again, be under his direction. And I, Leo Vance, was still the lead engineer. For this project, we will adhere strictly to the development pipeline. There will be zero tolerance for individualism. Every person at every stage must follow the chain of command 100%. Kyle declared from the stage, shooting me a pointed look filled with warning and gloat. Ava sat beside him, watching me with a blank expression, as if gauging my reaction. What reaction could I have? With a faint smile, under the gaze of the entire company, I stood up. I turned to Kyle and Ava and gave them a slow, deliberate bow. Ms. Chun, Director Chun, you have my word. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the silent room with perfect clarity. From this day forward, I, Leo Vance, will strictly adhere to every company protocol. I will execute every one of Director Chin's commands to perfection. I will never overstep, and I will never improvise. Protocol, I finished, is my bottom line. I sat back down. A flicker of what looked like relief crossed Ava's face. Kyle, on the other hand, grinned like a victorious warlord. Only I knew that in that moment, my heart had turned to a block of ice that would never thaw. You want protocol, do you? Fine, I'll give you protocol. A perfect protocol that will bury you all. The development of Project Oracle was officially underway. As if to prove his professionalism, on the very first day, Kyle released a sprawling, 200-page Project Oracle Development Protocol Bible. The moment it landed on our desks, everyone in the engineering department was stunned into silence. Leo, what the hell is this? Dave Ramirez, my right-hand man, leaned over, pointing at a rule in the document with a look of sheer disbelief. All variable names must exceed 15 characters and follow the format. Project name underscore function number. Did a human being actually come up with this? Another senior programmer, Miller, pushed his glasses up his nose and sighed. That's not even the craziest part. Look at this one. To guarantee code security, the use of any third-party open-source libraries is strictly forbidden. All functional modules, including data encryption and the graphics rendering engine, must be written from scratch. Is he insane? He's asking us to build a spaceship with a shovel. The team was in an uproar. Does Director Chen know the first thing about programming? This isn't a development guide, it's a suicide note. Leo, you gotta talk to Ava. If we do it this way, we won't even have a login screen by the end of the year, let alone a finished game. All eyes were on me, filled with expectation. In the past, whenever we were faced with this kind of amateur hour meddling, I would have been the first to charge in, armed with data and technical principles, to shoot down these ridiculous ideas. But this time, I calmly closed the document. Everyone quiet down. I stood up and looked around at my team, their faces etched with anxiety and confusion. You all saw the company-wide reprimand, I said flatly. I was stripped of my bonus for not following protocol. I have learned my lesson. I picked up the document that everyone else saw as garbage and tapped it lightly. From now on, this document is our only rulebook. Director Chen's word is law. My gaze swept over each person, my tone devoid of emotion. Starting today, I want all of you to forget your past experience. Forget about so-called shortcuts and optimizations. We have only one job, and that is to execute every word, every punctuation mark in this document with 100%, no, 200% perfection. Dave got agitated. But Leo, this is obviously wrong. Code written like this will be an absolute nightmare to maintain. It'll become a mountain of shit that no one can ever touch again. A mountain of shit. I smiled, a cold, sharp thing. Then it will be a mountain of shit built exactly to Director Chen's specifications. Our job is to build that mountain, brick by brick, precisely according to the blueprint. And when things go wrong, who takes the blame? Miller asked, his brow furrowed. Director Chen takes the blame. I replied without hesitation. We are the executors, not the decision-makers. Remember, we just follow orders. The room fell into a dead silence. My team looked at me, their expressions shifting from hope to shock, and finally to something complex and unreadable. They probably thought I'd finally broken, that I'd completely caved. I offered no further explanation. The next day, I began leading the charge in following protocol. Kyle demanded variable names longer than 15 characters. Fine. A single line of my code now took up half the screen. Project Oracle _userauth _validate password string 8675309 equals. Kyle demanded that every function have over 500 words of detailed comments explaining each line of code. No problem. I spent an entire morning writing a 1,000-word dissertation on a simple A plus B function, starting from binary principles and moving all the way up to the CPU instruction set. Kyle forbade the use of any third-party libraries, insisting we build everything ourselves. Easy. I had the entire team halt development on core game logic and instead focus on writing a basic HTTP request library from scratch. According to the bizarre requirements in Kyle's Bible, that task alone would take us at least a month. My desk was in the most visible spot in the office. Everyone saw what I was doing. At first, some tried to resist, paying lip service to the rules while secretly coding their own way. At the next day's code review, in front of everyone, I flagged every single line of non-compliant code and sent it back to be rewritten. This variable name is only 10 characters. Non-compliant. You've called an external JSON parsing library here. A serious violation. The comments here are less than 500 words. Unacceptable. My voice was as calm as a still lake, but every word was a whip cracking over the backs of those who try to cut corners. After a few rounds of this, no one dared to disobey. The entire engineering department descended into a strange, zombie-like state. Everyone, like soulless robots, stared at that idiotic document all day, churning out line after line of bloated, inefficient, and hideous garbage code. The office, once buzzing with passionate debates and creative sparks, was now filled with only the monotonous clatter of keyboards. Kyle was ecstatic. He would stroll through the office, hands clasped behind his back, a satisfied smile spreading across his face as he saw the absurdly long variable names and dense blocks of comments on our screens. He believed he had finally tamed me, that he was in total control of the engineering department. Ava dropped by a few times as well. She stood by my desk, watching me meticulously write code that I knew made her stomach turn, her expression complicated. Once she couldn't hold back. "Leo, I know you're angry, but you don't have to do this." I didn't look up. My fingers danced across the keyboard as I wrote another useless comment for a garbage piece of code. "Ms. Chun, I don't know what you mean," I replied robotically. "Everything I am doing is in strict accordance with company protocol. Isn't this exactly what you wanted?" She seemed to want to say more, but was at a loss for words. After all, I was now the company's most compliant employee. She had no grounds to criticize me. After a moment, she sighed, her tone softening. "I know what happened last month was hard on you, but as CEO, I have to think about the big picture. Kyle may be young, but he represents the company's management. I have to maintain his authority." My hands paused for a fraction of a second. "So, my personal feelings, my professional judgment, none of that matters in the face of your big picture and authority, is that right?" "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "Leo, can we not let this affect us personally? I was doing what's best for the company and for you." "Ms. Chun," I interrupted, finally looking up at her. "It's working hours. If you don't have any work-related instructions, please don't disturb me. Director Chun is expecting 3,000 lines of compliant code from me by the end of the day." The warmth that used to be in my eyes was gone. Ava's lips parted, but no words came out. She turned and walked away, a picture of dejection. Watching her go, I felt nothing. Best for me? No. You did it for yourself, for your title as CEO, and for the pride of the Chun family. Since you chose protocol, I will give you protocol. I just hope that when the bill comes due, you and your precious cousin can afford to pay it. A week later, at a senior management meeting, Ava singled me out for praise. "Leo Vance, in the engineering department, has shown a remarkable improvement in his work ethic. He is leading by example, strictly adhering to our development protocols and setting a new standard for all employees. This proves that our company's focus on process is yielding great results." Sitting in the audience, I listened to her praise, the corner of my mouth twitching into a cold, imperceptible smirk. Oh yes, great results. The foundation of a magnificent mountain of shit code had been successfully laid, and I was going to be its perfect master architect. Time flew. A month later, it was time for the first internal milestone review. We were scheduled to present the initial build of Project Oracle to the executive team and department heads. The conference room was packed. Ava sat at the head of the table, a hint of anticipation on her face. Kyle, looking like he had everything under control, cleared his throat and started his PowerPoint presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, after a month of hard work from the project team, I'm thrilled to announce that Project Oracle Demo V1.0 is complete. This version adheres 100% to the high-standard, strict requirement development protocols we established. The quality of this code is, I dare say, a model for the entire industry." He spewed self-congratulatory nonsense for 10 minutes, then waved grandly at the tech operating the demo. "All right, fire it up. Let's show everyone the fruits of our labor." All eyes turned to the massive projection screen. And then, the cringe began. The technician clicked the application icon. The mouse cursor spun for a full, agonizing minute before the program window creaked into existence. That alone made the tech-savvy people in the room frown. A login screen that takes a minute to load. What was this, 1998? It got worse. When the technician typed in the test username and password and clicked the login button, nothing happened. The entire application froze, a static image on the screen. Sweat beaded on the technician's forehead. He clicked the mouse frantically, but the program remained utterly unresponsive. "What's going on?" Kyle's expression soured instantly. He hissed at the tech. "Are you doing it wrong?" "And no, sir. I just clicked the login button like I'm supposed to." "Useless," Kyle muttered, shoving the tech aside to take over. He force-quit the application and restarted it. This time, he carefully typed in the credentials himself and slammed the enter key. Poof! The program didn't freeze. It just vanished. It crashed instantly, without so much as an error message. Dead silence filled the conference room. Every gaze shifted from the blank screen to Kyle, whose face was now the color of a ripe tomato. This is a fluke. It must be the demo machine. There's something wrong with this computer. Kyle sputtered, desperately trying to save face. That's enough. Ava's voice was like ice, cutting through his excuses. She looked toward the engineering section, her eyes like daggers aimed straight at me. Now, you're going to explain what's happening. Now, my cue. I slowly stood up, walked to the front of the room, and took the mouse from the flustered technician. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. It's perfectly normal for a program to have a few issues at this stage. My tone was placid, as if I were discussing the weather. I didn't try to restart the program. Instead, right there in front of everyone, I opened the project's source code. A wall of text filled the screen, absurdly long variable names and bloated, convoluted functions. I heard a few audible gasps from the managers who actually knew how to code. Ms. Chun, the crash we just witnessed originated in the user authentication module. I explained, pointing to a block of code on the screen. As per Director Chin's Development Protocol Bible, page 73, Rule 3, for the sake of absolute security, the user's password must be processed through a proprietary, ultra-strength encryption algorithm that involves 10,000 nested loops. Just now, this algorithm consumed excessive CPU resources, causing the main thread to block and, ultimately, the program to crash. I paused, then pointed to another section. As for the 1-minute startup time, that's because the protocol on page 121 requires the application to preload every single asset it could possibly use at launch. This includes models and textures for late-game levels, totaling about 5 gigabytes of data. So the slowness is by design. My explanation was clear, professional, and backed by evidence. Every single problem could be traced back to a specific rule in the very protocol document that Kyle had written and Ava had approved. I wasn't complaining or accusing. I was simply stating facts. But those facts, strung together, were like a series of loud, stinging slaps across Kyle's and Ava's faces. Kyle's lips trembled, but he couldn't utter a single word of defense. He had written that document. Every one of those moronic rules was a product of his own hubris, designed to make him look uniquely professional. The air in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone was looking at Kyle like he was the village idiot. Ava's face had gone from cold to ashen. As the CEO who had approved this laughingstock of a development plan, she had nowhere to hide her humiliation. Now, she practically spat my name through clenched teeth. If you knew these protocols were a problem, why didn't you say something sooner? And there it was, the blame shift. I met her gaze without flinching, a hint of mockery in my eyes. Ms. Chun, I think you're forgetting, I said, enunciating every word. 1 month ago, I was publicly reprimanded and stripped of my bonus for improvising in front of an investor. You personally told me that at this company, protocol is the bottom line. For the past month, I have strictly adhered to that bottom line. I have treated every one of Director Chin's commands as gospel. I have done my duty as an employee. What did I do wrong? My voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a hammer blow in the silent room. He's right. What did he do wrong? He was just being a good employee. Ava was speechless, her chest heaving with suppressed fury. Fine, a fine way to do your duty, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. So now that the project is a disaster, what do you, the director of engineering, propose we do to fix it? Simple. I shrugged. First, we scrap this ridiculous protocol document. Second, you give me full authority, including the power to modify and optimize code as I see fit. And third, and most importantly, I turn my head, my eyes locking onto the pale, sweating face of Kyle Chun. Keep people who don't understand technology from telling us how to do our jobs. My statement was a public demand for Ava to sideline her own cousin. You, Lao, don't push your luck. Kyle finally found his voice, shrieking as he pointed a trembling finger at me. I didn't even look at him. I just kept my eyes on Ava, waiting for her answer. Everyone in the room held their breath, their gazes shifting to the CEO. It was her choice. Would she protect her own foolish pride and her family connection and watch a $200 million project burn to the ground? Or would she bow to reality? And to me, Ava's expression flickered through a storm of emotions. She clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. After a long, tense moment, she deflated, all the fight going out of her. Meeting adjourned, she said, her voice heavy with fatigue. She didn't give me a clear answer, but her refusal to do so said everything. She couldn't let go of her pride. After the meeting, the engineering department was buzzing. "Leo, you're a legend," calling out the CEO and the golden boy in front of the whole company. That was so satisfying. I've been waiting for someone to put that clown Kyle in his place. Now they'll have to listen. The project can finally get back on track. My guys were ecstatic, thinking we had won, thinking a new day had dawned. Only I remained calm. I knew this was far from over. Sure enough, that afternoon, Kyle called 2 of the newer programmers into his office. 30 minutes later, the 2 young men walked out with red eyes, carrying cardboard boxes with their personal belongings. Kyle stood at his office door, his voice just loud enough for the whole department to hear. "Can't even write a decent line of code, and you have the nerve to blame the development protocol for your incompetence? We don't carry dead weight at this company." "Making an example of them," Miller murmured beside me. I watched coldly as the 2 confused and humiliated young men walked out, the first innocent casualties of this war. With that single, cruel act, Kyle sent a clear message to everyone. He was still the director, and he was still in charge. Minutes later, an email from Ava landed in everyone's inbox. In it, she acknowledged some issues in project management, but made no mention of the flawed protocol. She spoke vaguely of optimizing the workflow. Then, she announced that to overcome technical hurdles, I, Leo Vance, would lead a new technical strike team to resolve the performance issues in the current build. But Kyle remained the project director, and the protocol was not abolished. She wanted me to clean up the mess she and her cousin had made, but she refused to give me the authority or the recognition I deserved. She wanted the work done, but she wasn't willing to pay the price. Where I came from, you didn't get something for nothing. I looked at the email and smiled. Ava, you still don't get it. I don't want to compromise. I want you to pay for your arrogance and your stupidity. To pay the ultimate price. The disaster had only just begun. With the creation of the so-called technical strike team, my job seemed more critical than ever. Ava gave me a private office and assigned a few of our best engineers to my team. On paper, our mission was to solve the project's performance bottlenecks. In reality, it was a carefully constructed cage. Kyle was still the project director, controlling the overall timeline and resources. While he didn't dare micromanage my work anymore, he found other ways to sabotage me. "Leo, this bug is critical. I need it fixed by end of day. Leo, the investors want a progress update tomorrow. I need you and your team to pull an all-nighter and polish the UI. Leo, the logic in this module feels off. Rewrite the whole thing." He funneled all the most difficult, time-consuming, and disgusting tasks to my strike team. Meanwhile, he and the rest of the developers continued to slowly and methodically build according to his idiotic protocol. We were like a sanitation crew running behind a fleet of garbage trucks, desperately trying to clean up the trash as it was being produced. But a mountain of shit code isn't so easily moved. Fixing a single bug might require refactoring an entire module. Optimizing a tiny bit of performance could take days of untangling a spaghetti-like mess of code logic. Our frantic efforts were a drop in the ocean, completely futile against the tide of bad code that was sinking the entire project. My team's morale hit rock bottom. "Leo, this is unsustainable. We're killing ourselves over here fixing things, while Kyle is over there creating 10 new bugs for everyone we squash. It's a black hole." Dave Ramirez, his eyes shadowed with dark circles, practically wailed at me one afternoon. I clapped him on the shoulder and handed him a cold Coke. "Easy, Dave. Let him build. The bigger he builds it, the harder it will fall." "But what about the project? This was supposed to be our masterpiece." "Our masterpiece?" I scoffed. "It died the moment they handed it over to a hack to be defiled. Our job now isn't to save it. It's to give it a proper burial." Dave stared at me, his eyes filled with confusion. I knew they didn't understand my plan. They still held out a sliver of hope for the company, for Ava. I, on the other hand, had seen the truth. I led my team in working late every night, creating the appearance of a heroic effort to save the project. In reality, I dedicated only a third of my energy to the task Kyle assigned. The other two-thirds? That was for a secret project no one else knew about. Every night, long after everyone else had gone home, I would lock my office door and open my personal laptop. On the screen was a completely new game architecture, designed and built entirely by me. It was clean, efficient, and incredibly scalable. It was the game Project Oracle was always meant to be. All the frustration and rage I accumulated during the day, dealing with Kyle's moronic designs, I channeled into fuel for my own creation. This was my real battlefield. The chaotic mess at the company was just a smokescreen to keep Ava and Kyle blissfully ignorant. Another month passed. The project was now on life support. The application had bloated to an astonishing 10 gigabytes. It ran slower than a PowerPoint presentation. A constant stream of new bugs and broken features had turned the codebase into an untouchable mountain of shit that no one understood and no one dared to modify. The atmosphere in the office grew heavy and oppressive. The calls from our investors became more frequent, their tone shifting from concern to hostile. The company's stock began a slow but steady decline. The pressure on Ava was immense. The smile never reached her eyes anymore, replaced by a permanent mask of exhaustion and anxiety. She started seeking me out more often. At first, she tried pulling rank. "Leo, I don't care how you do it, but I want the game's frame rate stabilized at 60 FPS by next week." I would just look at her calmly and say, "Can't be done, Ms. Chun, not without a complete rewrite." Later, her tone softened, bordering on pleading. "Leo, please. I'm begging you, help me. This company is our baby. Can you really stand by and watch it die?" "It's your company, Ava, not ours," I corrected her. "It stopped being ours the moment you threw me under the bus to protect your cousin." My coldness left her feeling helpless and furious. Finally, late one night, she cornered me in my office. We had just spent another grueling day wrestling with a catastrophic bug that had no solution. She'd clearly been drinking. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and the smell of whiskey hung in the air around her. "Leo, what is it that you want?" she demanded, blocking the door. Her voice was thick with tears. "Is this it? Are you not going to be happy until you see me with nothing? Until you see this company burn to the ground?" I leaned back in my chair, my face a mask of indifference. "I don't want anything. I'm just following your protocol." "Protocol. Protocol. Always protocol." The word was a trigger. She stormed over to my desk, slamming her hands down and leaning in close, her voice rising to a shout. "Protocols are just words on paper, Leo. People matter. Have you forgotten when we started this company? We had nothing. We built this from scratch with sheer grit. Where did that Leo go?" Her words made me laugh. It was a loud, raw sound, so forceful it almost brought tears to my eyes. "People matter," I repeated, the irony thick enough to taste. "Ms. Chun, do you remember what you said to me in front of the entire company just 2 months ago? You told me that protocol was the bottom line. So what's changed? Now that the bottom line is costing you something, you get to move it wherever you want." My questions were like a knife, twisting in her heart. Her face went pale, and she swayed, her hands on my desk trembling. I was. She tried to form a defense, but the words died on her lips. Any excuse would have been pathetic. She was the one who, for the sake of her own authority, had branded me as insubordinate. And now she was the one who, for the sake of her own interests, wanted me to break the rules to save a project that was already dead. "Ava," I said, standing up and using her first name for the first time in months, "you are incredibly selfish. In your world, rules, emotions, people, they're all just tools for you to use. When they serve your purpose, you treat them as sacred. When they don't, you toss them aside like garbage." I stepped toward her, looking down at her tear-streaked face. "You asked where the old Leo went? I'll tell you. He's dead. He died the day you announced my punishment. He died the moment you chose to protect your idiot cousin instead of trusting me." Without another glance, I walked around her and headed for the door. "Don't go." She threw her arms around me from behind, her hot tears soaking through my shirt. "Leo, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please forgive me. We can start over. We'll fire Kyle. The company can be ours again, just the two of us like it used to be." Her voice was choked with regret and desperation. 2 months ago, her tears might have moved me. But now my heart was stone. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let her hold on to me. After a long moment, I spoke, my voice quiet and utterly calm. It's too late, Ava. One by one, I pried her fingers from my shirt. Then I opened the door and walked out without looking back. Behind me, I could hear her muffled, hopeless sobs. I knew the final judgment was coming, and my blade was already sharp. The final delivery date arrived, right on schedule. This wasn't just a project presentation. It was a trial that would determine the very survival of Elysian Games. David Sterling, the king of venture capital, was there in person, flanked by his legal and technical teams. The look of admiration and excitement he'd had 2 months ago was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating expression of a businessman who smelled blood in the water. The tension in the conference room was suffocating. Ava wore impeccable makeup, but couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the exhaustion etched into her face. She sat at the head of the table, her fingers twisting together in her lap. As project director, Kyle had no choice but to take the stage. He looked like a man walking to his own execution, hoping for a last-minute pardon from the governor. Mr. Sterling, esteemed guests, I will now demonstrate the final build of Project Oracle. His voice was dry and weak, completely devoid of confidence. The demo began. As expected, it was a catastrophe-level public execution. The game took a full 3 minutes to launch. When it finally loaded into the main city, the character models failed to render, appearing as a crowd of ghostly white mannequins. After taking 2 steps, the player character fell straight through the floor, plunging into an endless gray void. Kyle, sweating profusely, tried to open the skill menu to show off their cool special effects. The program crashed to the desktop while trying to load the UI. The entire train wreck lasted less than 10 minutes. On Sterling's side of the table, one of the technical auditors let out an audible snort of laughter before quickly covering his mouth. But that one sound was like a bomb detonating in the silent room. The faces of everyone present were a mixture of embarrassment, shock, and utter disbelief. They couldn't fathom how a project with over $100 million in funding, developed by a supposedly top-tier team for 3 months, could result in this, a piece of industrial waste that couldn't even be called a prototype. Kyle stood on stage, his face ashen, frozen in place. All his excuses and bluffs had been shattered by the cold, hard reality of his failure. Ava, Sterling finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a guillotine. He didn't even look at Kyle. His gaze was fixed on Ava. Is this the final product that Elysian Games has delivered? Ava struggled to her feet, trying to speak, but her throat felt like it was clogged with concrete. Don't bother, Sterling said, waving a dismissive hand. A lawyer behind him produced a folder. According to our investment agreement, if the project fails to meet the agreed-upon milestones by the delivery date, we reserve the right to unilaterally withdraw all funding and pursue legal action for breach of contract. I am now officially informing you that Apex Ventures is initiating the process to pull its investment. You can expect to hear from our lawyers this afternoon. Boom. Ava's world spun. She staggered, nearly collapsing. Withdrawal of funds. A lawsuit. Those 2 blows would be enough to utterly destroy Elysian Games, leaving nothing but dust. Years of her hard work, all of her pride and ambition, evaporated in that single moment. No. Please no, she whispered, her eyes vacant. Then, as if grabbing for a final, desperate lifeline, her head snapped up. Her bloodshot eyes found me, sitting silently in the corner where I had been the entire time. You. It was you. Thou. She suddenly shrieked, her voice raw and hysterical as she pointed a trembling finger at me. You destroyed my company. You destroyed everything. I gave you a chance. I put you in charge of the strike team. I begged you to save the project. And you just sat there and did nothing. You watched it burn. You ungrateful bastard. You're a saboteur. In that moment, she shifted all the blame, all the responsibility for her failure, onto my shoulders. She had conveniently forgotten who had created this disaster. She had forgotten how she had wielded protocol like a weapon to humiliate me. Faced with her accusations, I felt no anger. I had no need to defend myself. I simply stood up and, under the stunned gaze of everyone in the room, I walked to the presentation podium. You're wrong, Ava, I said calmly, a touch of pity in my voice. I didn't destroy your company. Your arrogance did, and the incompetent fool standing next to you. I shot a quick glance at Kyle, who looked like he was about to faint. Then I took out my own flash drive and plugged it into the laptop. Mr. Sterling, ladies and gentlemen, I said, turning to the investors. The real Project Oracle starts now. I double-clicked an executable file. There was no long wait, no stuttering load bar. In less than a second, a magnificent, breathtaking game login screen blazed to life on the projection screen. It was sleek, futuristic, and polished to perfection. The dynamic background, the high-quality UI, the soaring, epic score, it captivated everyone in the room instantly. Sterling's eyes lit up. I quickly logged in. A vast, stunningly detailed, futuristic metropolis unfolded before them. The lighting, the particle effects, the incredibly lifelike character models. It was all on par with a AAA international blockbuster. I took control of the character, running, jumping, and flying through the city. The movement was fluid, seamless, without a single hiccup. Next, I demonstrated the combat system. Dazzling skill effects, visceral, hard-hitting impacts, and intelligent enemy AI. The entire demonstration lasted no more than 5 minutes. But in those 5 minutes, the impact on everyone in the room was profound. This was the Project Oracle they had been promised. This was what a $100 million project was supposed to look like. When I finished, I said nothing. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was stunned, speechless, their eyes darting from the perfect image on the screen to me, a look of awe and disbelief on their faces. Ava and Kyle were white as ghosts. They couldn't comprehend how I had managed to pull this off right under their noses. You built this by yourself. Sterling's voice trembled slightly. He stared at me as if he had just unearthed a priceless diamond. Not entirely, I said, shaking my head. My gaze fell on the few loyal members of my team and on the 2 young programmers who had been unjustly fired. I had invited them here today. This was built by my team and me in our spare time with 0 resources from the company. I turned back one last time to face the broken woman who was once my partner. I just wanted to prove one thing, I said. Rules that stifle creativity lead only to ruin. And real talent, I finished, cannot be contained by any rules. My words were the final verdict, the death sentence for her and her failed kingdom. She slumped in her chair, her eyes glazed over, unable to speak. I knew it was over. She was finished. And for me, a new life was just beginning. The climax of Judgment Day came faster and harder than I could have ever imagined. After I finished my demo, David Sterling made a decision on the spot that shocked everyone. He stood, walked over to me, and personally pulled out the chair next to his. Mr. Vance, please have a seat. He had gone from calling me Leo to Mr. Vance. I believe we need to discuss a new partnership. He turned to his legal team. Hold off on sending that letter to Ms. Chun. Instead, I want you to immediately draft a new letter of intent. Sterling's focus returned to me, his eyes burning with admiration. Apex Ventures is prepared to offer $200 million to acquire the project you and your team have developed. We will fund the creation of a new game studio. You will be the CEO with full controlling interest and executive authority. $200 million. Full control. The offer wasn't just a life raft. It was a ticket to the top of the world. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. The remaining employees of Elysian Games looked at me with a mixture of shock, awe, and worship. Leo, you're the man. We're with you, Leo. My core team, Dave, Miller, and the others, jumped to their feet, their faces beaming. Whatever you say, boss, we're in. Even the 2 young programmers Kyle had fired were flushed with excitement, their eyes fixed on me. Just give the word, Leo. The tide had turned. The loyalty of the entire company shifted in a single dramatic moment. And Ava sat right across from me, forced to watch it all happen. She watched her investor abandon her in a heartbeat, offering a king's ransom to the very man she had tried to crush. She watched her core employees defect without a second thought, pledging their allegiance to me. It was a total public betrayal, the perfect term for her current situation. Her face, already pale, turned a deathly gray. The last spark of light in her eyes extinguished. She had lost, utterly and completely. I didn't answer Sterling immediately. Instead, I looked at Ava. Did you hear that, Miss Chun? She didn't respond, looking like a ghost. I then glanced at her cousin, who had shrunk into his chair, trying to disappear. Director Chun, do you have any objections to this outcome? Kyle flinched as if struck. He waved his hands frantically, a terrified mouse. No, no objections. Mr. Vance, sir, I was wrong. It was all my fault. I'm an idiot who knows nothing. Please, you're the bigger man. Just forgive me. His pathetic, groveling display was a pathetic contrast to his earlier arrogance. How pitiful. I looked away from them. They were no longer worthy of my attention. I reached out and shook David Sterling's hand firmly. A pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Sterling. The pleasure is all mine, he boomed, laughing. The deal was done. As I prepared to lead my team out of that toxic building for good, Ava lunged at me, grabbing the front of my t-shirt. Now, you can't leave, she cried, her voice hoarse with desperation and rage. Have you forgotten our 3 years together? Have you forgotten how we built this company from nothing? You promised you would stay with me, that we would make Elysian the biggest gaming company in the world. She was playing a relationship card. Too bad it was a credit card that had been maxed out and canceled long ago. Our relationship? I gently peeled her fingers off my shirt. I looked at her tear-streaked face and felt nothing. The moment you chose to punish me in the name of protocol, to protect your cousin, all that was left between us was protocol. The moment you repeatedly ignored my expertise and trampled on my dignity, all that was left between us was business. I took a step back, creating a clear, unbridgeable distance between us. Remember this, Ava. You were the one who killed our relationship. You were the one who destroyed your company. This has nothing to do with me. My every word was a hammer blow, shattering the last of her delusions. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, no longer a CEO, but just a broken person abandoned by the world. I didn't look back. I led my team out of the doors of Elysian Games, walking tall under the envious and admiring gazes of the entire company. Outside, the sunlight was warm and bright. A new era, my era, had begun. Epilogue. A week later, my new company, Daybreak Studios, officially opened its doors in a brand new office building directly across the street from the old Elysian Games headquarters. Sterling's $200 million came through, and we went on a hiring spree. Nearly all of Elysian's top-tier technical and artistic talent came to work for me. A month after that, Elysian Games, having lost its core project and its funding, finally folded. It filed for bankruptcy. From my corner office, I watched as its former employees carried their personal belongings out in cardboard boxes, their faces grim. I heard Ava had to sell her condo and her car just to pay off the company's debts. Overnight, she went from a glamorous CEO to just another person drowning in debt. As for Kyle, he had vanished without a trace. Dave Ramirez came and stood beside me, handing me a cup of coffee. He followed my gaze across the street and sighed. It's crazy how things change. Who would have thought 3 months ago that this would happen? I took a sip of my coffee and smiled faintly. No, nothing's changed. Gold will always shine. And garbage, I said, will always end up in the trash. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Leo, I was wrong. Can we go back to how things were? It was Ava. I stared at the words for a few seconds. Then, I deleted the message without replying. She belonged to a past that I had personally buried. Outside my window, a new sun was rising, flooding the city with light.